Okay, quick music disclaimer here. I do not own the rights to this music, which belongs to the rightful owner, who is the intoxicating mind of Dr. Frankenstein. So he made my intro and my outro, and I hope you guys enjoy. Check him out on Spotify and YouTube, and no copyright infringement is intended. Have a good day.
A clear choice of good versus evil, of right versus wrong.
Twisted Tales.
Yeah, thanks for tuning back in to Twisted Tales, folks. Hope everybody's having a good one. So my next little tale here that's bestowed upon me, it's a viewer request from my friend Stephanie. So tonight's tale, we'll talk about John Etter Clark. So the story behind this is John here. He was an Alberta man, a farmer, a provincial politician, and he went on to commit one of Alberta's deadliest mass murders. So let's blast off into this one, folks. Now, John Etter Clark, a political figure throughout the Legislative Assembly of Alberta for 4 years. He killed his wife, his son, 3 daughters, a boarder, and a worker on the farm. So it's been documented that he suffered from nervous breakdowns a few years before he snapped and committed these killings. Now, I'm going to take a shot in the dark here and say his life wasn't always as crazy as the end of his was. So, let's go back and start from the beginning. John was born in Stettler, in east central Alberta, Canada. Now, he was born March 29th, 1915, and he grew up in rural Alberta. So he was a smart man who moved on to finish his studies in Stettler before he moved to Calgary. And he moved to Calgary so he could continue his schooling at Calgary Normal School. So Normal School is where 2 instructors train a number of student teachers from each province. Sometimes this could be from the United States or the United Kingdom. In school, John was awarded a first-class teacher certificate as part of the class in 1934. And even for his school yearbook, it makes mention that he was the first-term president of his class 1B. Now, John's bio in the yearbook and his photo are pretty much it for the yearbook, because he didn't seem to be social around school or partake in any sporting events. So after about a year of Calgary Normal School, he began to teach in Calgary for the next few years. Now, this was up until his father passed away, and he ended up giving him some land. Now, John went back to farming at the 2-story farmhouse, but he did teach part-time in the surrounding communities. Now, in 1947, he married his girlfriend, Margaret Didwoody. She was born July 15th, 1920. And most of his friends recall him as an affable man who loved to tell jokes, and he was just a hard-working fella. So during his political career, especially the first term and leading into the beginning of his second term, Clark would more often than not perform such duties as attending hospital openings, going to remembrance ceremonies, and he would often give speeches. So he was a very well-known member of his party, but the newspaper headlines after this would kind of make mention of him in the most darkest of lights. So on the morning of June 4th, 1956, a man named Pete Parrott, he was a neighbor who lived on the farm next to John's. He actually leased the land from John, so he popped over to visit the family. And he made a brutal discovery. He found the body of the farmhand who worked on the Clark farm, named George Anderson. He was a 20-year-old from McLennan, Alberta, and he was actually found in the living room of the farmhouse. Upon searching the house and entering another room, he found the body of a Royal Canadian Navy sailor by the name of Bill Ola. He was a friend of the family, And in other rooms upon searching, the bodies of Margaret Clark and her 4 children, Janina, 8 years old, Ross, 7, Anne, 5 years old, and Linda, 4 years old. Upon seeing the victims laying around the house, he just got out of there, and he called police at a neighbor's that was 3 miles away, as the Clarks had no phone. So he popped over to visit, and he hadn't seen John all morning. And he remembers the scene. It was too grisly for him, and he just had to dip. Like, he called police. He did the right thing. Even George Anderson's mother, she remembers her son's relationship with the Clarks very well, because her son worked for them for over a period of 3 years, off and on. She does remember that he quit the job at one point, but then returned. Now, he also had an interest for riding horses and working with animals, so the job was right up his alley. The mother said he was to be married, and she actually didn't know who the girl was, because she thought of him as too young to marry. But he did finish all of his schooling before going back to working on the Clark farm. Now, Bill Ola, he was on leave, and he wanted to visit the Clark farm before returning back to Vancouver. And he knew the Clark family actually from his days as a high school student, in which Bill tutored him, because Bill would regularly spend weekends at the farm. Now, Bill was still alive when Mr. Parrott had found him, but he died in a hospital in Statler, so police couldn't use him as a witness to tell the details of what shook down. There was no motive given officially for John's actions, because even a few years prior to his breakdowns, John was actually looked at by a psychiatrist at the Calgary General Hospital. He went on to seek help after he had a couple nervous breakdowns, and he totally shit the bed from May 30th to June 18th, 1954. And after the crimes, a doctor named D.S. Lindsay was his family doctor. She was asked about John's mental health and his state at the time, so she just kept it confidential by answering with, "I'm sorry, I cannot give you any information at this time. It's completely confidential, of course." And he voluntarily checked himself in due to this, because he was having all his current life issues. Some did notice his instability. I mean, this was back in March, about a year, so this was 1953. John was actually at a debate and ended up turning bitter, and John eventually collapsed. He was not himself, and he was just entirely full of strain. Now, Pete Parrott, the guy who made these gruesome discoveries, had called the neighbor's house, so it was about 3 miles away, as I mentioned. Now, once RCMP were contacted, a unit was sent from each surrounding place. Example, Camrose, Alberta, Red Deer, Wetaskiwin. These are just to name a few. And everybody was geared up to check out the crime scene. The other surrounding areas were eventually searched to look for John, because he just simply disappeared and wasn't at the crime scene. But it didn't take police long to put 2 and 2 together. I mean, the family was massacred at the politician's home, and he was nowhere to be found. But thing is, he wasn't considered a suspect at first. The lead inspector, named LaBerge, he made mention that the search was ongoing for a missing person. And when he was asked if Clark was a suspect, he said not at this moment. But each member of the family had been shot once through their forehead, and Bill as well. But Anderson, he was shot once through the forehead and once through the side of his head. Now, the murder weapon was a single-shot .22 caliber rifle. Clark actually didn't own the rifle either. He actually borrowed it from his uncle. At the 2-story farmhouse, the investigation kicked off, and 14 special agents were called on scene. Clark wasn't amongst the dead, so police decided to team up and search the premises and the surrounding area. Clark was actually expected to travel to Saskatchewan the next day to help with the social party, because they were having a general election. But when he failed to show up, with no explanation given, his peers and other colleagues began to wonder, because he was always prompt. He was always on time, or he'd call if there were any delays, anything like that. Even residents around the area locked their doors up tight. Some were even grief-stricken to hear the news of the family, because that kind of slipped out. And, the family was just a pillar of the community. Everybody knew them. Everybody was deeply saddened by the news. Because some guys knew Clark, and they knew that he had an offbeat little bit of health, and the murders didn't make any sense to them as why they happened. And even some neighbors were warned by police just to stay in their homes with their doors locked. But that would soon be unnecessary. Late Monday night, the body of John Clark was spotted about 600 yards from the farmhouse. He was actually spotted by an RCMP plane that was doing an aerial search. So, that would have been the RCMP DH-3 Otter. So that was the plane craft that they were using. John was laying face down in a slough of water. This was actually a few feet in a ditch, so it kind of made it impossible to be seen from ground searches. Now, beside the MLA's body, police found the .22 caliber rifle, the same kind used in the murders of the family, the boarder, and the other friend that was visiting off leave. There was a single bullet hole in Clark's head. He committed suicide shortly after committing the murders. Now, after the discovery of Clark's body, more about the investigation kind of got out to public. The killings took place between 9 and 10 a.m., and they were discovered by Mr. Parrott at about 10:30 a.m. Several pools of blood had been located outside the farmhouse, so this indicated that John had killed 2 of the children outside before he took them inside of the farmhouse. And the ground searches, the lead investigator, they said they were about 200 meters around Clark's body, but the wooded area made it difficult to locate and venture through. Even a few days before the massacre, Clark told a friend about some machinery that broke around the farm, and that the cow's milk kind of went bad, and it was rejected from sale. He also made a note to his friend that he had a notion to go into the lake and keep swimming. So, kind of ironic that, he just wanted to go drown and die, and he was found in a slough of water and he was dead. And it was kind of crazy because Clark had a fear of swimming, and this was due to almost drowning a few years back. Because you have a fear of water, you're not really going to go out and play on the water, right? Once the discovery of Clark's body hit the ears of the townsfolk, everybody kind of breathed a sigh of relief, because it was no longer a crazy gunman threatening the community. And some even told reporters, thank God, upon hearing of his suicide. And a woman that knew Clark as a young boy, she told reporters that when police were searching for him, she said, I hope he's not found alive. Now, Margaret's father, George Dinwoody, he was just speechless and heartbroken upon the tragedy, because he actually planned on visiting the farm in just a few weeks, but now he had to go attend the funeral of his daughter and other family members. And he could never ponder as what happened over Clark's actions. He couldn't think of any reason for it. There was no reason financially. The family were happy. And it's just, there's no other reason to commit such heinous murders. The coroner, Dr. M.M. Cantor, he mentioned that the murder-suicide case was closed and no further investigation was needed on this matter. Funerals were held for the family, including John, 4 days after the discovery of the bodies, and close to 500 people attended the funeral. Nobody knows what made this well-respected man flip his shit. Maybe some mental illness, stress, there's lots of that going around. But lots of things could have came into play here. The family's actually buried at Liberty Cemetery near Erskine. All members of the family are memorialized onto one headstone, and like the entire family was kind of buried at once in one grave. And on the grave has the words, "Safe in the arms of Jesus," written on it. And that's all I got, folks. I really hope you enjoyed that tale. So, it sucks everything shook down what it did. Like, this is the worst mass murder in Alberta's history, and I'm glad I could be the one to tell you about that. So I'll catch you guys for the next episode. Thanks for tuning back into Twisted Tales.
Twisted Tales.